What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. And Nick, today we're talking about defense because I feel like defense is the big question mark right now with this Rams team. You got a new defensive coordinator, no Aaron Donald. You lost the defensive line coach in Eric Henderson. So a lot of question marks in place. But first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
I'm good. I got a new Rams shirt. I thought Dean was wearing the exact same one before we started. But he's not. So we're good. Always trying to grab cool and new, interesting Ram stuff.
And shout out to the some of the Rams podcasters. Jay specifically. Jay is sending us, content creators and pin creators. Jay is sending us a couple new Ram shirts. So shout out to you, Jay. We're going to be repping them on the pod very soon once we get them. But also, if you guys are enjoying the content, make sure that you like and subscribe. A lot of good stuff coming your guys' way. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into the defense as the season progresses. Obviously, the offense, I feel like it's going to stay for the majority the same. But as we get more film, as we dig into the detail, as we see some of the new personnel, specifically the offensive line and the new running backs, I think we're going to have a lot of new fun content coming your guys' way. So make sure you like and subscribe, be a part of the podcast, support, and we're going to be here for you all season long.
Was it last year when McVay and Snead kind of came out indirectly and said the offense is going to be good, the defense is going to be like a little slow, but we'll be scoring a lot of it was last year, right? Like we'll be scoring a lot so the defense can will not have to be as big of a component as it was under previous regimes. And that was the idea going into the season. But by the end, it felt like the defense really figured something out. Like I was blown away by what Raheem was able to do with that unit last year. Totally deserves a head coaching position on the Falcons now. But you hold the Lions to, I think it was 3 points total in the second half of that playoff game in Detroit, which is like one of the craziest home arenas right now because they're just so loud. Overall, I would give last year's defense a pretty good grade for the young kids that they had and Aaron Donald. So you hope that they just continue on the rise next year. But with Chris Shula, you definitely get a little worried that, things may be a little different.
Well, you think the unpredictability, some of the methodologies that you can carry over from Raheem Morris, from Wade Phillips, from Brandon Staley, that's all going to come into play. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But the unpredictability of Sean McVay's offense and them being such close friends and confidants, I strongly believe that Chris Shula's defense is going to be similar to Sean McVay's offense in the art of misconception, in the unpredictability phases, right? Being able to rotate defensive backs and being able to stunt up front at the line of scrimmage. They're all things that have kind of carried over from year over year and the Rams have built upon with these new defensive coordinators as they've come into place. So I think that's all going to be really fun to watch. But I feel like the defense in totality, it's a big question mark in 2024. Yeah. Aaron Donald's retired, as we know. Raheem Morris is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. We lost Coach Henne. Coach Henne's at USC. Fight on, Nick. He's no longer coaching the defensive line. You got Giff Smith, who Sean McVay seems to be very happy with as the new defensive line coach after spending 2 seasons with the Chargers as the outside linebackers coach, which was very similar to Brandon Staley's career path, right, in terms of how he kind of built year over year under Vic Fangio. And he was also the interim head coach for part of last season after Brandon Staley was hired. So he was a highly regarded individual in the Chargers' building and doesn't have a long journey to go to become the Rams' defensive line coach. He just has to walk across the hall, and there he is. And then also Chris Shula, as he previously coached inside linebackers, that role is now going to be taken over by Greg Williams. So Greg Williams is another guy, was Packers pass game coordinator in 2023 after coaching the Cardinals cornerbacks for 4 years in 2019 to 2022. So he'll take over as the Rams' inside linebackers coach after that job was held by Chris Shula last season. So in totality, you got some new faces in the building, right? And they're on their 4th defensive coordinator in the McVay era. So first it was Wade Phillips. So you had obviously Wade Phillips. You go back and look at pictures of Sean McVay and Wade Phillips on Google, they look like they're ancient, right? You go all the way back to 2019, or even 2017, they got the old colors on, the dark blue and the gold. And it looks so different. Even the white that they mixed in, And it was obviously with Wade Phillips from 17 and 19. Then Brandon Staley was hired in 2020. Then he was poached away to go to the Chargers after one season. Raheem was hired in 21, was a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator in his first season. And then throughout the next couple of years in 22 and 23, you lost some key personnel. Aaron Donald was on his way out. Jalen Ramsey left. And you had to shuffle some things around in favor, Nick, to your point, to support the high-powered offense. I think, 75%, 80% of the salary cap is going to the offense this season. So now they've opted to internally hire Chris Shula. And Chris Shula, I think what we've been talking about, Nick, you and I in the past, and as we've been just watching film and trying to aggregate all of our thoughts, is he's going to be able to create his own variation of defensive schemes of the past, like one that draws from his experiences under previous coordinators while adding his own kind of innovations and spins to it, right? Because the key is adaptability in this league. The league has changed, it transforms, everything changes from year to year. So you can't stay stagnant. You can't just run a 3-4 base defense with man coverage like you did with Wade Phillips. You want to be able to bring some similarities to what you saw with the number one defense with Brandon Staley, right? Their ability to move defensive backs, to keep the unpredictability in place, to even drop edge rushers in coverage, to impact that, obviously the star position that came to light with Jalen Ramsey. But I feel like some of the trends and some of the innovations are going to move more so towards what Brandon Staley brought to the league and brought to the Rams specifically.
I feel like with Wade Phillips back in the day when the silver or the gold and dark blue, navy blues was like, it was almost like when a president is running, they pick a running mate that can just cover like a different section of the demographic. So it was like Sean McVay is like the hot new young guy. And then let's get the oldest possible defensive coordinator to come in that like understands the job, understands what he has to do. And then like from there, it's just gotten more and more like Sean McVay is like more established. So he can bring in people that like he really wants to work with. And then that's where you got Staley. And then even closer with somebody he worked with in Washington with Raheem. And then now to come all the way to Shula, who's just like been his buddy and like slept on his couch. Like Sean McVay has totality among the Rams organization to really bring in whoever he wants. He's proved that.
Yeah.
But Chris Shula, I don't think has proved that he is capable of being a defensive coordinator yet. Outside of his relationship with Sean McVay, I don't think he would have gotten a defensive coordinator job on another team.
I know Miami was looking at him. I think Miami wanted to bring him in, but I don't know how much that had to come into play in terms of like the Don Shula relationship with Miami. And like, he's an obvious candidate from the Rams. He's a coordinator from the Rams. He's going to get interviews, right? Yeah. And he was coaching the inside linebackers and had a couple of other roles. But like, to your point, I totally get where you're coming from. And also Wade Phillips, like going back to Wade Phillips for a second, 1976 was when he started coaching. He had 20 top 10 defenses from 1976 all the way to when he hung it up and I went to the AFL or wherever he went. But it's so interesting, right? Because he was kind of part of the trends of defenses as they were starting to phase out, right? Some of the base schemes, some of the 3-4 schemes, some of the man coverage things that pass attacks, as quarterbacks got better, receivers got better, and offensive schemes changed, they got more difficult to defend. Right. So like you saw some of the man coverages in place, like you saw the personnel kind of mold towards that regard with Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters coming into the building, and then eventually Jalen Ramsey. But like you can't argue with some of the things that they did in that 2018 Super Bowl. Like Wade Phillips can hang his hat on a really good coaching performance in 2018 in that Super Bowl with a front of Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, and maybe not even a ton of talent and edge, but you built it from the inside outside. And you were still able to be a really productive unit. But like I said, things change and continuity is so key in this league. But there's a ton of personnel up front via the draft and via the back end in free agency that makes this a really tough overall evaluation. Like how much changes, how much stays the same? How do you get the best of all three previous coordinators and form your own defense? So as it stands right now, a 3-3-5 base with a 5-1 front. And I'm just going to give you guys a quick visual of this courtesy of the Coach A on Twitter, and he has a great YouTube channel as well. 5-1 front, 5 players being 3 defensive linemen and 2 edge players. I feel like that's likely going to be their formation and their foundation in terms of it favors the talent that they've added up front via the draft. Raheem tended to move away from this and favored a 3-3-4 look, which was much more in line with what the Rams saw under Wade Phillips, but at a much higher frequency of zone coverages that Raheem Morris liked to deploy in the secondary. So he had a little bit of a hybrid of Wade Phillips and Brandon Staley in his repertoire. That's why we feel like Chris Shula is going to implement all three. And I think a lot of that came from having to simplify for some of the younger and more inexperienced personnel while being able to do a variety of things with guys like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. But the three defensive linemen will likely kind of, I would say, continue the gap and a half technique that you saw so strongly developed under a guy like Brandon Staley, which is a hybrid front. That's been around since day one of the Brandon Staley implementation of this defense as a base. So you can imagine some kind of combination of Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Bobby Brown and Tyler Davis probably rotating in the middle with Jared Verse and Byron Young on the outside. So I think that's going to be really fun to watch. And in terms of like what Raheem did really well last year, specifically creating pressure off line stunts, they finished 6th in the NFL in defensive line stunts last year per PFF. And that's how they created so much pressure, right? They kept Aaron Donald away from getting double and triple teamed constantly. And it's something that I would expect that Chris Shula to keep in his arsenal as he, continues his trajectory towards a defense coordinator and hopefully a head coach in his case, not in the Rams' case.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope he sticks around for a little longer. It said like he doesn't immediately get taken away. But I guess if he immediately gets taken away, he did a fantastic job. So, monkey's paw. But it will, like, you lose somebody that is constantly getting double teamed. So, I mean, as much as they try to avoid it, there was just no denying that Aaron Donald was going to get more men on him. So you're hoping that like more creativity kind of up front is really something that I think a lot of people are going to be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even necessarily due to like blitzing, right? Because one of the things that the Rams do really well was that fire zone blitz. And it's not even a standard 5-man fire zone blitz, but it's a bonus fire zone blitz where you're only rushing 4. That was one of the things that Raheem Morris did an incredible job of doing. And then also the Rams were first in the NFL in post-snap rotation last season. So Raheem Morris, he ran plenty of cover 3, but kept it unpredictable by consistently shifting defenders on the back end post-snap. So like you want to implement all of that creativity. You want those line stunts up front. Cover 3, quarters, and cover 6. That all these defensive looks, they all favor the personnel that they brought in. And I feel like there's going to be a trend towards seeing more of that, right? Because guys like Quentin Lake, Darius Williams, Trey White, Kobe Durant all have that versatility on the back end. Like in terms of secondary, I expect the coverage to trend more towards what it looked like in 2020. So like what Chris Shula can do similar to Brandon Staley is implement a majority of cover 3 and quarters. Because if you see that 40 to 50% of the time, like you could see some of that stuff, and you could dip back into cover 1, 3 seam, cover 6, which is a lot of what Baltimore deployed last year. So it's a very popular coverage that you're seeing the league start to progress to. So like try to pick up on some of the league trends, because that's what Chris Shula is going to be picking up on and looking to implement with the versatility he now has in the back end. But like I talk about this because it's so important, like heavy focus on unpredictability. Like that is Sean McVay's middle name. Like I expect him to go back to the Brandon Staley roots in terms of the front and back end coverages, with an expansion of some of these tight and penny coverage fronts with gap and a half technique in their base. Like that, I mean, it sounds really complicated. We're throwing around a bunch of jargon now, which is apparently on Twitter fetishized, which is such a weird quote by Pablo Torres, that NFL jargon is fetishized. But like people are craving to understand what it is that these teams are implementing, why it's ahead of the trend in the NFL, and why defenses are so good, right? How are you able to stop these high flying passing attacks? How could you stop everybody with the exception of Patrick Mahomes? Like it's just such a great question.
I mean, if the Rams do go back to the 2020 defense, like similar, like the most similar that they have since Brandon Staley was there, I think the fans will be just absolutely, like in love with what they see. But you're so right. Predictability is just so key. The Rams were first in the NFL in post-snap rotation last season. Morris ran plenty of cover 3, but kept it unpredictable by consistently shifting post-snap. Cover 3 quarters, cover 6 favors. their personnel, because there's so much zone versatility now on the back end, in that guys like Quentin Lake, Darius Williams, Trey White, Kobe Durant, it's like they're going to make it interesting. I haven't heard that fetishized quote, though. It kind of makes me feel a little icky, to be honest with you. I don't like that at all.
I know, me too. But like, nobody wants to talk about standard 3-4 base looks anymore. Like, this is what Wade Phillips's defense used to look like, and it was super easy to comprehend, and it's implemented at the high school and college levels. But now, like, everything has changed, and nobody wants to talk about 3-seam and fireside blitzes and like all of these different things and line stunts. Like, they're all football jargon and stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense until you apply it to the way that your defense is going to look, or to a specific player, right? Like, everybody was confused as to why edge rushers were dropping back in coverage, why Jalen Ramsey was playing at the line of scrimmage when he has talent at the outside, proven talent at the outside. But like, they're all things that these new look defensive coordinators like to implement to keep the unpredictability factor to offenses, right? Because like these stagnant looks, like, quarterbacks can take a picture and then they say, okay, the defense is in this look. All right, now pre-snap, I can move a receiver. I could put him in short motion. And then all of a sudden, you're able to beat the defense play after play after play because you know exactly what they're going to be running. They've shown it on film, and now they're stagnant at the line of scrimmage. So,
yeah. I mean, so much of what McVay does is you just have, like, moving on the offense, like always have things changing before snap, have the most pre-snap motion. Like, I know Bears fans that are like watching the Bears last season, and they're like, if like nothing is moving before the ball is snapped.
Yeah.
There is zero movement happening right now. And it's so easy for these defenses to understand. As soon as like, imagine playing Madden with somebody, maybe your brother. As soon as you know what they're doing, they're cooked. Like, you have sought them out. You know that they're, it's third quarter. He usually tends to go deep here, which is something that McVay does. It's like, send more guys back, drop more guys back. As soon as the other team has an idea of what you're doing, which was Bill Belichick in that 2018 Super Bowl, where it was changing things after the snap, so Goff had no idea what he was doing. Like, that's when you're cooked. And that's why the unpredictability is just so key. And it's hopefully it's something that Shula implements. It should be.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it definitely will be. I know Bears fans were pissed off. I know Eagles fans were pissed off with the lack of motion and the stagnant offenses that they've consistently rolled out week over week. Because by week 10, you're figured out. You're on film. Like that, if that's your offense and you're not evolving by week after week after week in some form, like the Rams implementing the pistol offensively after the bye week, how it just opens up their duo scheme and allows them to collect 4, 5, 6 yards per carry on every single play. Like, it's, you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you implement this new scheme and it works, and then you build upon it. It's like kind of similar to what Cooper Kupp said in an interview with his wife, where he was talking about how Sean McVay had like 20 plays installed in 11 personnel in his first year, and then 20 turned into 40, and then 40 turned into 70. And then all of a sudden their entire offense was built out of 11 personnel. And then like McVay has had nightmares over that, because that is what got him beat in the 2018 Super Bowl, was staying stagnant and not being unpredictable. So the only card he had in his back pocket to show in the Super Bowl was, let's throw another tight end on the field and go into 12 personnel, which happened in the second half. It just wasn't enough to be able to beat a guy like Bill Belichick and the Patriots defense.
It just happened too late. And to not have Todd Gurley win you that game will just destroy me. I know he played terrible in your previous playoff games, but whatever. We're not here to talk about that. We're not.
I mean, you could have one Jared Goff completion and C.J. Anderson and Todd Gurley doing what they did against Dallas, and that Super Bowl would have been 30-13. Like, you would have saw something completely different. But we got ours. We got ours in our back pocket. 49ers still don't. They're still struggling. They're still posting pictures of Jaquiski Tartt dropping the interception for Matthew Stafford, although there were still 9 minutes left in that game. But going back to Shula, if
he caught that, for lack of a better term, we probably would have been cooked. But he didn't catch it, so it doesn't matter.
But that offense was so stale. Like, they had like 20 total yards in that quarter, and they were just series after series after series. They were falling behind even further in the 8 ball. And Jimmy G was Jimmy G, so they just had no chance. But like, while much of these fronts, I feel like are based on some of Staley's roots that we talked about, like I'm expecting Chris Shula to lean into some of Wade Phillips' more aggressive looks, right? More blitzes, more simulated pressures, right? Like while you keep much of that pass rushing creativity, specifically those stunts that he picked up under Raheem Morris that you're not going to have with Aaron Donald, but you're going to have with a pass rush by committee. Like that's why we talked about that being so important, was because Aaron Donald, the fear is that the Rams can't be unpredictable without him, and deployed various fronts. But like with new faces who are versatile, who are willing, and will do whatever is needed for the betterment of the defense, guys like Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner and Byron Young, Chris Shula is still going to be able to implement a good amount of this throughout the season. And we talked about the secondary already, but to kind of sum it up, Wade Phillips, like he liked the 3-4 look because in Wade Phillips's terms, a standard 4-3 look, which is 4 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers, he felt was a tell because those 4 players who were rushing the passer were those 4 players who were rushing the passer. There was no disguise. There was no nothing. With that 4th pass rusher, there was like when you're in a 3-4 front, if they don't know who that 4th pass rusher is going to be, like there's a mystery element, which is why Wade Phillips's defense worked so well, because he was able to do some of those things. And from a protection standpoint, it's more difficult for an offensive line to be able to game plan for those kind of things. In a 3-4 base defense, just being one gap and then having your 4th rusher coming from God knows where. It could have been Connor Barwin, could have been Clay Matthews, it could have been Corey Littleton, could have been Mark Barron, right? Like all of these guys came into play, but like the Rams, I think if they could leverage that bonus fire zone that I talked about a couple of minutes ago, where they're only sending 4 rushers versus 5, like they would in a standard fire zone blitz, like that's a very, very popular Vic Fangio staple. And it's a branch of defense that Brandon Staley liked to implement. And it's something that the Rams hammered repeatedly under Raheem Morris. Plus, It ties back to Wade Phillips's methodologies, just with a, like I like to say, modern facelift.
Yeah, okay, sure. Like a Simon Cowell, I guess. Simon Cowell pre-ridiculous Lego face that he has now.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. And what Brandon Staley did so well when he famously tweaked the defense, right, to match a majority of Vic Fangio's key principles.
How happy they look. They look so happy.
I know. Well, they had the number 1 defense that pandemic year in 2020.
And like so cool.
McVay struggled so badly against Vic Fangio, but the zone coverages that he implemented on the back end, which was so much different than Wade Phillips's predominantly man defenses with Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib and then Jalen Ramsey and even Eric Weddle on the back end, and the single high safety looks, like that was all Wade Phillips. What's the name? Brandon Staley came in like reduction of inside linebackers, split safety looks that allowed for more flexibility and coverage depth. And Brandon Staley was praised for using these light boxes. He used the light box on 85% of the Rams' plays in 2020, which was the highest rate in the NFL at the time, yet they were still 6th in yards per carry allowed, 5th in rushing yards allowed, and 8th in rushing touchdowns given up. So even though they had less linebackers on the field and deploying lighter boxes, they were still really effective. Still really, really effective. So like now you're going to get some strong talent in the secondary. You're going to have a lot of talent just in some of these new looks in terms of your 5-1 tight adjustments and some of your penny deployments that you're going to roll out in the field. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So you got a bunch to kind of chew on here. But I think Chris Shula is going to end up taking the best of it all. Like what worked will stay and what didn't work will be adjusted and disregarded in favor of innovation, deceptiveness, unpredictability, both up front and on the back end.
Yeah. If Chris Shula brings something similar, like I said earlier, great picture of him. Like he looks like he can bench 225 and squat 315, which we all know is the bar. If he can bring something similar to what we saw with Staley in 2020, which it seems like that could be where he goes, I think all Rams fans are going to welcome him with absolutely open arms. And hopefully without Aaron Donald, you assume there will be a step back, but maybe these young guys are finally ready just to go in there and make a huge impression on the league. Yeah. And I think to bookend this episode, I started off by saying I think last year they talked about how the offense will be like incredible and the defense will be able to kind of not take a step back, but not be on the same level as the offense. I think this year is the year where that may have to be like 100% true if they have aspirations of like NFC Championship and Super Bowl.
Yeah, all three phases have to be able to play together, right? It can't just be a cheap, inexpensive defense that you're rolling out like, inexperienced members in the secondary. You're bringing in Band-Aids like Akella Witherspoon and John Johnson to be the main focal points of your defensive back group. Like, I think Raheem Morris did a pretty solid job, even though he was more of a standard look, but he built upon what the last defensive coordinator did. And he won a Super Bowl in his first year, right? A lot of those methodologies were already implemented with Brandon Staley in 2020. But in 2021, there was Raheem Morris building upon that and finding ways to win Super Bowls, albeit with other talent like Von Miller and Aaron Donald in the building, right? And Jalen Ramsey and Eric Weddle on the back end and all the talent that they added on the offensive side of the ball. But all three phases have to be able to work together in a way that you don't typically see season by season with teams. So that's the hope. You're going to have to do all those things if you're going to want to win the division, beat San Francisco, and get back to the NFC Championship.
Yeah. And I think there's enough talent in the building to do so. So
I think so too. Thank you guys for listening. We greatly appreciate you guys. As always, go Rams. We're going to have some more conversation on the topic coming up soon. We're going to be talking about everything in between the lines, especially as it relates to training camp. So we love you. Thanks for listening, and go Rams.
Go Rams. Horns up. Like and subscribe, which I don't think we said.
We did. We said at the beginning.
Oh, we did?
Yeah. Rob Havenstein, longest tenured Ram, drink.
Bye, Rams fans.
Peace.